Okay, so now that you've been studying with the Jehovah's Witnesses for some time, and you're thinking they're wonderful people, there's great fellowship, they're considerate, they come by and check on you, they really listen to the things that you are talking about in your life. You know, you might be thinking, this might seem a little too good to be true. That's the question you have to ask yourself. Is this too good to be true? So, now that we've talked about, in my last video, some of the tactics that Jehovah's Witnesses use to keep you talking, to get you listening, anything that they can to engage you in conversation so that you'll keep having them back. We went kind of through that in my last video. There's a long list of things, though, that they don't tell you right off the bat. You might discuss them during your Bible study. You might have questions that you might bring up. For instance, you might ask, is it true you don't celebrate birthdays? I don't want to say they directly lie. I've seen it done many ways. I've seen sometimes witnesses say, well, that's true, we don't. But can I share with you why that is? They don't deliberately come out and say, you are going to give up every joyous celebration and occasion you've ever experienced in your life. They more pitch it as, this is something we choose to do because we love Jehovah. They will probably go into the history of, do you understand where Halloween came from? And Jehovah's Witnesses aren't the only ones who don't celebrate Halloween. But they're mostly going to back it up with, we choose this, we choose this. And this verbiage becomes so normal when you're talking to them that you might find yourself having those same conversations in your head, watching a movie and going, well, it didn't directly say I can't watch this, but is this something that Jehovah would approve of? I have to apologize really quick. I don't know why my camera keeps going in and out of focus like that. I'm sure it's really annoying. I will figure out after this video how to stop that from happening. But anyhow, so there's a long list of things that they will not tell you. And everything you have heard is true. You cannot celebrate, God, that's annoying, birthdays, Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving even. There's never really a good explanation as to why Thanksgiving was knocked out, but that one's out. New Year's, you can't celebrate the New Year. You can definitely celebrate anniversaries, which as a kid we always thought was a little, we were a little robbed. It seemed like just a nice way where our parents got to celebrate and get gifts that we got them, made for them, etc. So yeah, it seems like when it's something that an adult wants to celebrate, somehow that's okay. The interesting thing I find with holidays is, we have, a lot of us know that, Easter and Halloween are two good examples. Christmas is another one, but people are less familiar with it, that do have a pagan history and a pagan foundation, and are holidays that we have adapted through time and kind of made our own, depending on which country you live in, sometimes what state you live in. And there was a question in the Awake magazine, which I have written down, from 2003, where they were asking whether or not piñatas were acceptable. Now, I can tell you in my family, they weren't. I grew up in a Hispanic family, and for whatever reasons, my parents, we just didn't do piñatas. They chose not to. It was a worldly thing. But in this article, they were asking about piñatas, and I'm just going to read to you exactly what it said, and then you can see, is this something that we would apply to other holidays? It says, when considering whether to include a piñata at a social gathering, Christians should be sensitive to the consciences of others. A main concern is not what the practice meant hundreds of years ago, but how it's viewed today in your area. Understandably, opinions may vary from one place to another. Hence, it is wise to avoid turning such matters into big issues. So what they were saying here as far as the piñata goes, put this up here, says glare isn't. Yeah, it might have meant something 100 years ago, but we really need to look at what it means today. So you would think we could apply that same philosophy to other holidays. Yes, Halloween or Easter may have had pagan beginnings, but what does it become today? What does Christmas become today? Not everyone celebrates Christmas as Jesus's birthday. I don't. I just don't. I think it's an awesome time for giving. I love the old stories of Saint Nick. I love any of the stories of this individual who was going around and bringing presents and joy to others. I just like it. But Jehovah's Witnesses don't apply that rule to everything. So that's one thing you're going to learn. There's a huge double standard. So despite that scripture saying that about piñatas, they don't apply it to everything else. So Christmas is definitely out. And that one's a biggie. I love Christmas, but I'm also a huge fan of Halloween. Easter, never was a big fan for. I didn't raise my kids believing in an Easter bunny, ever. We did something different in our household. We did like a treasure hunt. When my kids got older, I did use it as a time to celebrate. Not celebrate, but as, I guess, a memorial. And maybe that's just because it was instilled in me for my entire life. When they got older, we made unleavened bread. They tried some wine. But they still got a ton of candy. Excuse me. A load of candy. And I had a good time. And later on, when they asked, well, what's the big deal with the bunny rabbit? I explained, the history of Easter, and they were like, that's just kind of weird. And I was like, yeah, people do what they do. So I don't care. People want to celebrate Easter, how they celebrate it, that's fine. You're not going to have those options, though, if you decide to be a Jehovah's Witness. And by decide, so let me clarify, I was never actually baptized. I was dedicated. I asked to get baptized, and I had a parent that actually put a stop to it. So I was there very, very, very close. I think I might be the only one of all my friends that didn't get baptized. So they can't punish me, at least now they don't, the way they would if I had been baptized. So if you are baptized and you do something wrong or something that breaks the religion's rules and you get disfellowshipped, they basically cut you off. Your own family doesn't usually speak to you. Sometimes some family members may choose to if they're in the immediate family, but they can't discuss spiritual matters. But from mostly what I've seen, people are so afraid of doing the wrong thing and breaking a rule that they will choose not to associate with family whatsoever. They want to look the best in Jehovah's eyes and in the organization's eyes. And definitely in the congregation's eyes, because that judgment is a biggie in how comfortable your life is in this church. And you might be thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to give up all the holidays. I don't really have to. Yeah, you do. That's just the way it is. If you want to join their club, you have to give up those holidays. And you might think, well, I'm not going to. They can't really be that extreme. I asked them while I was studying, can anything bad happen? And if you'll notice when they're studying with you, again, they're not going to directly say, you will quit smoking or you're out. There's no bitterness. It's always been a very loving, well, let's see what Jehovah thinks about that. Well, how did so-and-so in the Bible respond when they were asking? Everything is going to be a very nice way to say, we want to please Jehovah. Well, is that taking away from Jehovah, or is that making Jehovah proud? And they will use this over and over and over and over again to explain why they choose to not celebrate holidays. And if you want to be in their club, you will choose the same thing. So be prepared for that. And that's going to be pretty much for any of the issues that we kind of go over today. Everything will be explained as to what would please Jehovah, what does Jehovah want us to do. So the blood issue. If you've watched any other videos, and I'm sure you have, you've heard about the blood issue. And this basically is that Jehovah's Witnesses do not accept blood transfusions. Now, when I was growing up, they didn't accept them altogether. My understanding now is they might accept fractions of blood. Still doesn't make sense to me because I've read what's in the fractions they can accept or they cannot accept. But in other ways, like immunizations, they'll accept those same fractions. It's really weird. I have not done enough research on it to To speak on it, I can only tell you is that they are against blood. Now, a lot of people may choose to not get blood transfusions. That's fine. In this particular scenario, though, it's not your choice. And this is one thing that Jehovah's Witnesses hold so tightly to. So as an example, I have 2 brothers. Well, I have tons of brothers, but 2 in particular that required blood transfusions in their life. We have a very unlucky family. Both of them, at the time that they required transfusions, they were worldly to the worldliest worldly letter. They're doing great now, but they were in phases of their lives where they were partying it up all the time, sleeping around. Unfortunately, there was some addiction involved. They were doing all of these things that completely break every rule Jehovah's Witnesses set out, and basically every commandment that's in the Bible short of murder. But my one brother found himself in a bad situation. He'd been stabbed in the lung. He was bleeding out pretty bad. By the time I made it to the hospital, he was not doing well. They were getting ready to flight him out. And I came into the room trying to basically just comfort him. And the doctor came in, might have been a nurse, but basically came in and said, he's going to need blood transfusions. And I mean, not so much the word transfusion made it out of his mouth, that my brother, who's tattooed, I mean, from here down to his toes, in this situation because he got into a fight, like I said, not living the greatest life ever. And the one thing that he was managed to scream in all of his pain was no blood. So he would break, even at this point, was breaking every other rule, but it was still so ingrained in him that maybe Jehovah could forgive all of these other sins, but by God, he was not going to take blood. And as you can imagine, my mother was out in the hall doing her little JW cheer. Yeah, she was so proud, so amazingly proud. I was so disgusted. I mean, luckily I, at that point, had more say over his care. But because he was of sound mind, he was able to make that decision. And he refused a blood transfusion. She went and got a lot of points, I'm sure, from the brothers and sisters in the congregation. They flighted him out. And luckily he did not die. They got him to Vegas, which had a much higher level of care than what we could provide in our facilities in Arizona. And so he did make it. My whole point is here you have a kid who's not been a witness for years. He actually was never even baptized, this particular brother. And it was still so ingrained in him, blood is bad, do not accept blood transfusions. That even at his worst, and even after committing every other sin under the sun, to man's law and to God's law, he still would not follow the Jehovah's Witness law and accept a blood transfusion. My other brother, he happens to have leukemia. Same situation. He got his diagnosis. He had about a week, I'd say, to live. And by the time he did accept the transfusion. But for that initial couple of weeks, he refused. I'm not doing it. And again, these are guys that have either been in prison or in and out of jail. Again, doing great now. I don't want to give you an indication that I'm saying they completely flushed their lives down the toilet. They didn't. They were going through their times like a lot of people do. And so my brother with leukemia, yeah, he's, has a child out of wedlock, not living a great life. And he refused blood, and he refused, and he refused, and he refused. Then it's a long story short, but he ended up accepting a transfusion, and God, the nick of time, it literally saved his life. So Jehovah's Witnesses, and even a lot of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, it is so pounded into your head and your heart. So if you intend to proceed studying with Jehovah's Witnesses and have an interest in becoming one, you need to understand you're not just putting yourself at risk. You need to look at your kids and know you're putting them at risk, because every kid feels the same way. If you would have asked me when I was 10 years old about blood transfusions, I could have told you, no, I will not take one, and I would have been okay to die for it. Of course, a 5 to 10 year old doesn't necessarily understand life and death and the weight of that, but they understand that they will not accept a blood transfusion. We will let them make these decisions. won't let them pick out what shirt they can wear to school, but they can choose who they're going to serve for the rest of their life and whether or not they want to take blood. And granted, a doctor doesn't take a child's word, do you want to take blood? Unfortunately, it's left up to the parents. And a lot of babies and a lot of children have died for this one belief, that they do keep changing. So there was a time that blood transfusions were allowed. Again, inconsistencies. I personally don't think that God is inconsistent, but what do I know? So that's another thing. Yeah, be prepared. Family members will die. You as a parent have to allow your child to die, but that's okay because he's going to be resurrected and spiritually will be safe. So you have to understand, Jehovah's Witnesses really don't care a whole lot about this physical world. It's all about your spiritual well-being and your spiritual health. So it's okay to die here on earth. As long as you are spiritually in the right place, refuse that blood transfusion, you're gonna be resurrected. That's another thing. Military. Can't join the military. We're not in a big draft. I was gonna say draft season. We're not in a time where there's a military draft right now. But when there was a draft, Jehovah's Witnesses, of course, had to refuse. They could not join. They were offered an alternative service, which is basically public service, and hours that they would put in lieu of joining the military. But the governing body forbade that also. And I'm not sure if that's changed or not. I don't keep up much with that area of like politics and I really haven't even thought about it since we don't have a draft. But I can tell you a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses got into prison. So if you love your country and you want to serve in the military, not going to happen. Smoking and drinking. Okay, well, we all know smoking's not good for us to begin with, and we know drinking in excess is not good for us either. However, if you do either of these things, you can get away more with the excessive drinking as a Jehovah's Witness, because let me tell you, it happens a lot. But if you get caught, that's going to be a different story. One of the worst things you can possibly do as a witness, if somebody catches you smoking a cigarette, I mean, to them, that is just like, sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought. You can get away with rape before you can get away with smoking a cigarette. That's the God's honest truth. They have certain rules that protect rapists and abusers in their church. But somebody who smokes cigarettes, that's it. When I left, one of the first things that I started doing was smoking. Why? Because if that's what's going to keep you away, I'll take it. Drugs, obviously. We don't want people, drugs are not good for you. I don't want people that I know and love to be on and addicted to drugs. However, if you are an addict and you're struggling, you can expect to be completely cut off. And so the one thing that you need as an addict is a good support system. Any recovering addict or alcoholic will tell you that. A lot of it came down to their support system. Well, you can expect that will not be there as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't care how much they're hugging you today. If you fall into addiction, forget about it. You're out. Also right now, I would definitely recommend look around at every single person that you know and you love. And I want you to think about your brothers and your sisters, your friends, the girl that you go skiing with every winter, the group of friends that you go maybe hiking with, your best guy friends that you go and have Taco Tuesday with. Once you become a Jehovah's Witness, they're all out. That's it. They're now bad association. You're good association. They're bad association. It's us and it's them. And once you are part of us, you can be no part of them. And they're going to say, because you can be no part of this world. And again, you might think in your head, I would never give up my friends and family. They're not being harmful to me. They are being harmful to you, per Jehovah's Witnesses, by not being Jehovah's Witnesses. That alone makes them dangerous, dangerous, dangerous. So, you might think, I wouldn't give up some of these things, especially my friends. And this is the problem with cults, is it doesn't happen overnight. It happens very slowly. You start thinking like them. You start emulating their behaviors and their thought processes. And you start taking them into your own, and you start thinking in those same terms and words and the same verbiage in your head. And after a while, you don't need them asking you, does this make Jehovah happy? You start asking yourself. Then you start watching others. Is what they're doing making Jehovah happy? Because this is the other part of it. This is how they keep everybody so everybody's watching everybody. And you don't want to get caught doing anything, but by God, you're going to make sure everybody else is walking the line too. And so they pretty much rat on each other a lot. So yeah, pretty much you're going to be cut off, or you're going to be cutting off everybody that you know. Now, we had some association with our worldly family members. We would do like a family reunion here or there, but it was very, very limited, especially because my uncle was a scientist, and you don't want to put the nuclear physicist in the same room as the Jehovah's Witness, especially when she was a new Jehovah's Witness. I have nightmares still of the fights that they had. I just really couldn't understand why my uncle wouldn't just give in and know that Jehovah loves him. So we would associate with my grandma, but it was very limited association. So whereas when I became an adult, I had a lot of siblings that were still being raised in the household. So I did definitely flex my behavior and my attitude in order to keep in contact with my siblings, who eventually all got out themselves. And I don't just mean moved out. I mean, they got out of the religion. And I wanted them to see that you can be and live a good life, and you could live, you can still have morals. I wanted them to see that, and I wanted them to always know they had a place to go, as far as somebody that would be there for them, even if it's just to listen. But there was many times that my mom would not let them associate with me. It really just depended on how she felt I was in her eyes. So it is very, very likely that, more than likely, we never associated with any non-Jehovah's Witnesses. Very rarely family. Might have some visits here and there, but there wasn't regular association. And that goes for your kids too. So you're going to have to explain to your daughter why she can no longer play with her best 5-year-old cousin, because her best 5-year-old cousin doesn't love Jehovah enough. Kids are not allowed to associate with non-Jehovah's Witness kids either, period. What else do I got issue with? Higher education. This one kills me. Higher education. You go to school, public school usually. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses are homeschooled. I went to public school. My girlfriends went to public school. But we knew we were not going to college. It just wasn't in the cards. Now, why they made me work so hard for a C is beyond me. I think it was more about keeping up appearances, that, Jehovah's Witnesses are good students. It's all about this reputation. It's all about this appearance. I look back and I'm like, I don't get it. Like, I hated school. I loved my friends there, my worldly friends, but I hated school. I struggled with how they taught me versus how I learned. And at one point around the 8th grade, I kind of didn't get it, and I gave up. I just stopped turning in work. And I didn't get cocky about it to my parents, but the reality to me was the world's coming to the end. Why do I need to turn in a paper? Why do I need grades? Like, the world's ending. I don't really think Jehovah cares whether or not I'm completely understanding algebra. I just don't think, and according to what I'm being taught, he doesn't. So I kind of picked up on that very early, that it, to me, in a 13, 14-year-old mentality, was just stupid. It made no sense. You're telling me one thing and you're wanting me to do another. And I was pretty stubborn about it. So education, yeah, you don't go to college. Some do, but usually people who are educated either became a witness after they already got their degree, or they fell off to the wayside, went to school, college, and then came back. People sometimes do let their kids go to school, but we do talk a lot about them. They're usually just not using their time in the best way that Jehovah would appreciate. And they're definitely not held in as a higher regard as somebody who decides to pioneer and work as a gas station attendant instead of getting an education. So yeah, education is definitely out. No cursing. I'm just going to throw this out there because I personally likes my curses. I don't think I'm foul. Mostly. But there is no cursing, no accidental cursing. I get that a lot of people in their regular lives that aren't worldly don't curse. I don't think it's the end of the world. I think there's a time and a place. So as a kid, I made a batch of brownies. I really don't know what I would have done as a Jehovah's Witness, because I didn't have very good cooking skills either. And I hated service, and I'm terrified of speaking. Yeah, you know what? I probably just wasn't cut out to be a good JW. So anyways, I wouldn't have been a very good wife. Here I had burnt this thing of brownies, and I was trying to scrape the bottom of the pan with a knife, just like this, but with all my pressure. I wasn't very smart, so it's no wonder that I probably shouldn't have gone to college to begin with. But needless to say, bam, right there, knife goes into my hand, blood squirting everywhere. I freak out. Obviously, you instinct, and I believe I said something like shit, 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 hell, 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 hell. Started crying. Now my mother comes in crying. Now you think she's doesn't come in crying. That was a lie. She comes in running. I'm crying. And you think that she's probably coming in and be like, oh my God, what just happened? Her concern wasn't the blood squirting all over the place or these horrible brownies that she was probably going to still force us to eat. What happened on that? I'm crying and I can't get a cry, and I'm showing her my hand, and she literally looks at me and says, Cassandra, there is no need for that kind of language. She was less concerned about my physical hand and more apparently concerned about what Jehovah heard me say. I should have just taken my hand and right across her face. That was her concern. So that's what I'm saying. They're so tight about things that your child's well-being in that exact moment came second to the fact that she just said hell, hell, and shit a couple of times, screaming at the top of her lungs. So no cursing. Dress code. Very, 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 very strict dress code. Now, I'm not saying everybody likes to dress like a hoochie, but if you do, even if it's from time to time, that's completely out. Now, I've definitely seen things have changed a little bit in the fact, and I don't know if it's just this congregation here, because I went about a month ago, and I haven't seen that many 5-inch heels since like a Motley Crue video. I was like stunned. Now, everybody says that Boise is very different than other places, and I'm not just saying for witnesses. It's, believe it or not, this place here in Idaho it's pretty progressive, and so I don't know if it was just this congregation. I find it hard to believe. I find it hard to believe that witnesses were wearing them all together. So, or maybe they don't know if they've laxed the dress code. I know there's still places where you have to wear nylons. But you can't wear leggings under your skirt if you're cold, because I think leggings look too trampy. And we all know how Toni Morris feels about tight pants, so tight pants are out. Clothes up to here, pretty much. I know even as a young woman, if I was wearing a tank top, it was constantly, there's too much cleavage, as if I picked out my own clothes or paid for them, or C, had any control over the size of my breasts. They just pointed out, they make you very, very, very aware of your sexuality, because everything that you're doing is somehow causing feelings in other people. So you are responsible for what occurs with other people. I was going to segue that into the 2-witness rule, because it's a very, 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 very interesting rule that they have in the church that is very damaging to a whole lot of people. So I think I'm going to segue to my next piece, part 2, with, is it ever okay for a child to be sexually abused? And the answer is yes, as long as nobody saw it happen. See you guys next time.
I'm on the television.